So we now have the opportunity for some dialogue, which we will attack through some questions and answers. And as your moderator, I get the first crack. And I'll be a little bit provocative, just a little bit provocative here. And let me ask this question that any of you might want to handle, and that is this debt crisis a function of the inherent greed in the financial markets and the profit motive of the big financial houses? Is that the underlying cause, or is it something completely different? Anybody want to handle that one?
I can volunteer.
Okay, please, thank you.
And maybe I can give my very esteemed British colleague a chance to comment by my comment. No, I would say it's both. Of course, it would be much too simple to say it's just a conspiracy. Everything is fine in the Eurozone and was ever fine, and we were just victims of the greedy hedge funds and so far. That's certainly not true. But on the other hand, and I don't want to go too deep into this, I think it is quite clear to me that governments now have a very, very difficult task in going against this very vague entity that is called financial markets. There are very different actors comprised in this term of financial markets. There are very responsible investors that fall into the category. There are clearly speculators. One just has to realize the sheer volume of money that's that is sort of existent in these so-called financial markets. And I think one lesson that we all have learned is that it is extremely difficult to move against the intention or the will of these markets. But again, I would like to stress, I don't want to say basically it's the speculators. It is us. We have lost the confidence because it has become clear that what we thought was a wonderful system wasn't. It was a system that could be misused, where the controls didn't work. Mm-hmm. And so I see mainly our responsibility to get our house in order, and then to make it, of course, difficult to those who just sort of are speculating. And this is why I mentioned my British colleague. This is why Germany, together with a couple of other European member states, is very much in favor of establishing a financial transaction tax to make it a little bit more difficult, or at least to get out some money from the transactions, which are probably at the moment, in my view, considered a little bit too abstract as something that takes place like a natural force. It doesn't. It's human activity, and maybe it should be made a little bit more difficult to move around huge amounts of money so easily. Thank you.
Pryia, would you like to pick up on that a little bit?
Yeah, I will. I mean, I think as my honourable colleague Peter knows, we will agree to disagree on the financial transaction tax. But I think going back to the premise of the question, what is very interesting for me looking back, going back all the way to 2007, is that we seem to have got in phases about, what's to blame. So we talk first, about Lehman Brothers, about foreclosures, about the housing crisis. Then we go to the Eurozone. Then we actually now looking at financial markets, the dynamics of the financial markets. I think what is very clear to me, and I'm sure to all of us, is that, as Peter was saying, there are so many different factors that have contributed to where we are today. The important thing is actually to look ahead, and what do we need to do to overcome that, both as individual countries, the United States, the UK, and as my colleagues whose countries are all in the Eurozone have described in the Eurozone area itself. So I'm as I think you will have sensed from the discussion so far, optimistic from what we've seen, particularly over the past few weeks, that we are on the steps towards that goal.
Super. Okay, now let's open it up to the floor. We have 2 microphones, one on my right, your left, and one on the other side of the room. And if you have a question, we would like you to stand up and walk to the microphone. And you can form a little queue in front of each one if you wish. And then please state your question and direct it to one of our panelists first, and then we'll see where the ball bounces. So let's begin on this side.
My pleasure. My name is Adam Wolisz, faculty in Berlin, Germany, and adjunct in Berkeley. First of all, thank you very much for the interesting comments, and I would like to ask 3 questions. Number 1, it's very frequently claimed, and I'm an engineer, I can understand that mastering of the crisis of euro, or in general the crisis in a long period, will need a harmonized governance, that has been stressed here, and that would mean, for example, a centralized financial policy, say a super Ministry of Finance. Now, the first question is, do you agree with that? Number 2, do you believe, and that's specifically towards the honorable gentleman, as a representative of the members of Euro state, do you believe that within the Eurozone that is really the readiness to delegate this competence to some central unit? And the third question, more to the honorable lady, do you believe that can not lead to Europe of 2 speeds, leaving UK and those who are not in Euro some kind aside of the first speed? Thank you a lot.
Okay, so the first question goes to whom? Pick one.
I think our honorable Consul General of Italy said a lot about governance, so now I was missing this point. Do you really believe
Okay, Mauro, tackle that first question, please.
Well, Italians have always been pro-Europe. It's our history, maybe because we founded Europe 1,000 years ago. Sorry, okay. It was easy. No, but we are definitely pro-Europe. So from our point of view, a centralized fiscal policy is a necessary step to take, even if this means giving up sovereignty. The point is, yes, we are getting there. Slowly, but we are getting there. From the Italian point of view, this is not a major problem. After all, fiscal policy centralized will mean defining the thresholds, and then to some extent, every country will be able to define the content within certain thresholds. So there will always be some flexibility, but again, just think of the United States. If we didn't have the Constitution, we would still be, you know, with the fathers still discussing in Philadelphia about what to do next. We can't stay there. We have to move forward, and I don't know when, but we're gonna get there sooner or later. So it will happen. Don't ask me when, but it will happen.
Okay. The second question, who wants to handle that?
Well, the question was, will it happen, wasn't it?
No. Do you believe that there is enough readiness, I'm speaking about some reasonable horizon, to really make it reality?
Mm-hmm.
Well, already the so-called fiscal compact is a step in that direction. You know, it gives very strict constraints to fiscal policies. And in my opinion, France has always been very keen on its own sovereignty. The coming months will tell us whether there will be an evolution in this direction. The idea of having a European vigilance over banking is very important. You know, there are signs that we're getting in that direction. So it's like a slow movement, but if I had to answer yes or no, I would say yes.
Okay. And then the third question related to this 2-speed Eurozone, the high rollers and the low rollers. So how will that play out?
I think it's interesting at the moment. So much of our attention is actually on the Eurozone. The European Union is much bigger than that. the European Union is a political construct, as I think my colleagues and I have mentioned earlier. And it's also a union where there are many different types of common policies, where different countries are part of different types of policies. The Schengen area being an example of that as well. So from the British perspective, we don't see the European Union as a sort of rigid block which has to stay as one construct and have the constraints that will entail. The flexibility that the current system gives all of the countries and is a tenet and hallmark of the system that we have all signed up to is one that I believe will continue and will allow it to develop in the way that's right for all member states of the European Union.
Super. Okay, now let's go to this side of the room and thank you for your question, by the way.
I have a question for Mr. Rothen and one for Mr. Battocchi. Mr. Rothen, as we all know, the U.S. manufacturing bases have been decimated by global competition, but in Germany, manufacturing is thriving. So what has Germany done differently that allows manufacturing to remain competitive? And I also have a question for Mr. Battocchi. Earlier you mentioned that the EU governance needs to be improved. So how do you think it can be improved? And by the way, I don't think the U.S. governance is any better with the Do-Nothing Congress and Tea Party and so on and so forth. So.
Thank you for those questions. Did we get those? The first one was about manufacturing, and the second one about competition. So,
thank you. Well, differently in what respect? Differently compared to our European neighbors, or differently also to other industrialized states? As to the first aspect, I would like to say, and I'm actually very thankful that you asked this question, because that was a point I wanted to make anyway. We are not more intelligent than our partners in the European Union. We are not morally better. The thing is just we've made the mistakes earlier that they have made, and we were forced to correct them earlier. So we just have the advantage that we had to adapt earlier and correct developments that were no longer tenable. And that happened in Germany, I would say about 15 years ago. In the mid-90s, we were at an all-low economically. We had a persistent high unemployment rate of around 10%, 5 million people, and with our system of support, that was costing the government enormous amounts of money. We had almost no growth rate. I still remember this. We were always looking for a one-digit, lower one-digits growth rate. It wasn't there. It was always 0.2, 0.3, something like that. So we had to realize already at the late 90s that something was going fundamentally wrong in our country. And that had to do, I would say very basically, I think also something that one of my colleagues already mentioned, because we hadn't adapted to globalization. And we had to do it. And the irony was that it was a social democratic head of government, Chancellor Schröder, who in the beginning of the second millennium decided that Germany had to implement certain far-reaching structural reforms in its labor laws, in its social security laws, in order to regain competitiveness. So this is why we did this. It was very difficult. Chancellor Schröder lost power over this. Luckily, the government that followed did continue the reforms and didn't go back. That was a very positive thing. And so in the late 2000s, we finally got back on our feet. So this is my answer as far as our European colleagues is concerned. And this is why we are now probably getting a little bit on their nerve, because we're telling them, look, guys, it's just we've seen it all. you have to do the same things that we have had to do because it's not going to work otherwise. So this is the one thing. And then to put it in a wider framework, well, Germany is very lucky that we have a particular structure. We have small to medium-sized enterprises that are very specialized in their products, that manufacture stuff where they sort of have niches worldwide and where they can export all over the place. That's our famous so-called Mittelstand, the medium-sized companies. And I understand that this term is now becoming so popular that it's becoming a term that is going to be used also here in the American English language, like Angst or Wanderlust. You will just take it from me and you will be the first ones to take it home. German Mittelstand is going to be a term to explain how you can keep, even in the 21st century, an industrialized country, or to keep industry in a country, in a very developed country with a high level of salaries. Thanks.
Great, thank you. On that same topic, Ioannis Andreades, do you want to jump in here and talk a little bit about manufacturing and competitiveness? We know that the great industries of Greece are tourism and shipping, but that there is also talk of much progress with the solar industry and the wind industry and energy. Well, what other ways can Greece become truly competitive in the context of Europe?
It is said that tourism is the heavy industry of Greece. And partly it is true because the tourist industry has increased during the recent years, but this particular year it has been affected by the uncertainty of the economic environment which prevailed both in my country and generally in the globe. So we had a decrease of the number of tourists who arrived in the country, and then a decrease of the spending of the tourists who arrived in the country in comparison with their spending in the previous years. But it's a main factor for boosting the economy of the country. Second, Greece is renowned for its ship owners. We have the biggest float in the commercial fleet in the world belongs to Greek ship owners. However, not all ships are registered in Greece. They are registered in other countries who offer fiscal privileges, let's say. They may fly the flag of Panama or the flag of Cyprus or the flag of another country, the Dominican Republic, etc. And why they don't fly the Greek flag? They are not so patriotic. They may be patriotic, or they may not be. If we fly the Greek flag, they have to apply the rules for the labor of the seafarers, which are rather rigorous according to the Greek legislation in comparison to the rules which prevail in the other countries who have, let's say, the flags of easiness. Now, the third part is that the country is trying to privatize certain sectors of the Greek economy, and through this means to increase investment and develop the economy. It may be in the real estate sector, it may be in the services sector, or even in the public utilities. We hope that the present government, which appears to work in earnest to take the necessary steps to redress somehow the economy. Of course, we have a long way to journey. The results might not be immediate. The country has been for 5 consecutive years in recession. We have lost roughly 20% of our GDP in the last 5 years. We hope after a couple of years to take the way of the ascendancy, to start to increase. The primary deficit, which is due to the general governance of the country, is not that high. It was about 1.5%. But we have to serve the external debt. So there were dedicated 12 billion euros for the service of the external debt. This increases the deficit in 2011 to 7.5%. If we didn't have to serve the external debt, it would have been to 1.5%. I hope that I have answered at least
That's
partly
helpful.
the question.
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for your patience over here. Keep your questions brief, and we'll ask our panelists to have brief responses, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Consuls General, for taking the time to address us tonight. The Honorable Consul General from Italy mentioned pension reform, specifically raising the age at which someone would retire. And I believe that the Consul General from Germany alluded to pension reform or reforms that help get them out of their low point as well. I'm interested to hear what is going on in the United Kingdom and Greece in terms of pension reform and welfare reform, and especially with Greece, how you then deal with the unrest, let's say, that would ensue, and that would lead maybe to government change, which would then be contra further reforms and the prescription by the EU for getting out of your low.
Excellent topic. It's a key question in Europe. Let's begin with the UK and then go to Greece.
Sure. I'll keep it very simple and stick to 2 points, really. One on pension reform. Unsurprisingly, as my other colleagues have mentioned, pension reform is a key part of any government programme to tackle public sector spend. And in the UK, we're no different. We have increased the pension retirement age. We have also, we are currently in negotiations as the government with public sector unions to negotiate out of final salary pension schemes, which are obviously a significant future burden on the economy. So absolutely, pension reform is a key part of our own government's programme. You mentioned welfare. That's also a very key part, and one of the things that this government in the UK has focused on is getting people back to work. Historically, there has been an issue with long-term unemployment, and so we've introduced new programmes both to ensure that people are actively looking for work at the first stages of being entitled to unemployment benefit, and also make sure that those incentives to return to work remain in the system.
Okay, let's go to Greece.
Thank you. It's a very pertinent question, actually, and I have to admit from the very beginning that the Greek welfare and pension system had been very generous. One could retire after having worked only for 15 years, and this especially applied to women. Not everybody retired after 15 years of work, but there was a small minority who retired after 15 years of work. This contributed a lot to the deficit of the pension schemes. The normal age was 60 years. At the 60th year of age, one could retire. Now it has been increased to 65, and these days, presently, the troika of the lenders are trying to convince the government to increase the age limit at 67. Then the pensions have been decreased by about 40% during the last 2 years, and it might be a further decrease by another 15 to 20%. So the minimum pension is at 325 euros per month, which is not a lot. There are, of course, people who are taking 2,000 or 2,500,000 euros as pension. So the decrease is gradual. The ones who are at the low threshold of the pension scheme will not have their pensions decreased any further. The ones who are over 1,000 euros might see their pensions decreased further by 10, 12, 15%. The second is the welfare system. The welfare system of the country is very generous again, and has been more generous in the past. Everybody who is in the country can go to a hospital, might have an operation, might be treated, might be hospitalized, and don't pay a cent. We were receiving busloads from Albania, from Bulgaria, from the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, who were coming and visiting the Greek hospitals, had their operations there. They did pay nothing and they returned after their treatment to their countries. This, of course, has to stop. The government has realized it, the people have realized it, but still, in comparison to how it works, the welfare system in the United States, it's thousands of years ahead, I would say. Here, when you step in a hospital, you have to provide your credit card, or if you don't have an insurance. There, nobody is asking you for insurance, or at least they were not asking for insurance. It was taken as granted that everybody who is in a needy situation, he has to be treated. She had to be treated. It was part of the perception that as a human being, it had a human dignity and he was worthy to receive the benefits and which everybody, every human being is entitled to have. Now things are turning. The country, the economy of the country cannot sustain anymore this system. We were spending for medication as much as Spain was spending, although Spain has 4 or 5 times more population than Greece has. So it was in excess, the system. It has to be reformed, and it is a reform. It's in the process of reform. Spending has been cut, and further cuts are imposed.
Thank you for those insights, and I just want to emphasize the shock that goes along with the imposition of those changes. You see people in their late 50s, early 60s believing they could retire, and now all of a sudden have to add 5 to 7 years onto their retirement and losing many key benefits, and that is a huge shock to people's way of living. So let's move to this side of the room.
My name is François Miliot, so I'm French, another partner of Europe. Mr. Rothen, you are completely right. I think this crisis is not only a financial crisis, it's a systemic crisis involved, of course, a psychological paradigm. I think the problem, what we saw since a few years, it's a result about that the fact we build a Eurozone without a political and institutional structure. So there is a kind of incompatibility between a lot of countries, and the Eurozone is fragile about this fact. And this crisis is a systemic crisis, need to involve about the ethic paradigm too. I think we built our economy on the middle-size structure and also middle class. And we had to keep the confidence about the middle-size industry and middle class. Without this confidence, I think we can fail on the one hand, the populism, right or left wing, or the autocracy, who impose this system. So the ethic dimension is very, very important. And one little technical question, it's about the Constitutional Court allowed your parliament to vote. But what's happened if the Spain became to the bankruptcy? And I'm really skeptical that your parliament will vote to help Spain, because Spain is a big deal. I remember the fact was in the 19th century, we create also a common money called, I think it's a golden pack or something like that. And twice time, this common money failed. I think one money, we create this money between Greece, Italy, Germany, Belgium and France, or perhaps not Germany, but Belgium and France. And this money failed because Greece became to the bankruptcy. And,
so the question is...
Yeah, the question is, we need a political structure to keep this Eurozone.
Okay, Peter Rothen, do you want to tackle that one?
Well, I would agree, and I think this is what it has been all about for quite a while now, that it's not just enough to make available huge amounts of money, but that we have to, you can call it differently, you can say deepen the European Union, or introduce a political dimension, or whatever you might call it. But yes, we have to add a coordinated fiscal policy, especially. And I think that point was raised already a little while ago, and I'd probably like to add here, in addition to what has been said already, that it is already happening. You know, we will, in my view, we will probably for quite a while not have a European finance minister, because this simply might be too much for a number of member states, maybe including Germany, to sort of have a figure that then works on the European Union level and gives you the impression that this important part of sovereignty has been given away. But the amazing thing about the European Union is, and this is how we have developed it over the decades, one can find the most amazing creative constructions and get ahead. As regards the coordinated fiscal policy, it's probably not necessary to do it in the classical way. That means to have a finance ministry with a finance minister for the European Union. But you can probably do it in the way that you look at what are the things that need to be done in a coordinated, joint way. And if you look at that, you will see that a lot is already happening. I mean, the European, the Stability Compact that has already been decided is something quite extraordinary. We would never have been able to have this before the crisis, because, and I stand to be corrected here, I believe one of the amazing features of this compact is that it has been adopted by many more countries than there are Eurozone members. I think it has been adopted by 25 out of the 27. And it's a binding international legal document, if you want, that will force, or that imposes an obligation on all member states to reduce their deficits within a relatively short lapse of time to 0.5 of their GDP, something we've never had. The ones that started it were the Swiss in 2003. And then Germany followed, because we still have a very huge deficit, And we felt that we have to do this, and we will not really get it done if we don't sort of impose this obligation upon ourselves, including our federal entities. So we have to, ours is a little bit stronger than the European one. Our financial stability compact, which we call debt break, forces the German government to bring down the debt by 2016 to 0.35% of GDP. And it will, from that time onwards, it will no longer allow our federal states to indebt themselves at all. So this is very far-reaching. And by and large, and I think we are all very happy about that, more or less, this compact has been adopted by almost all European member states. So we already have a very strong element of fiscal coordination in the sense that everybody has to follow the same principles. And we still have to go on and do more, but we're on the way.
Thank you very much for that very insightful response.
Just a very
yes,
brief
please,
thing,
Mauro.
just to say that in terms of balanced deficit, balanced budget, Italy will have 0 deficit in the year 2013, so next year. Breaking news. Not many people know, but that's what's going to happen. Already today, if you take away the amount of money needed for servicing the debt, so the interest, there's a huge primary surplus. This is also very important to evaluate the performance of the public finances.
Thank you. We just have about 15 minutes left, and we don't want to keep our panelists too long tonight, so you have to keep your questions very brief, to the point, and they will keep their responses very brief and to the point, and then we'll be done in 15 minutes. So, please.
Okay. I'm Julia, and I'm Greek, and just one background, and I've studied in the UK, and I'm doing my master's now here. I'm just thinking that I was very happy to hear you, or like the majority of the panelists, supporting further integration in the European Union. But I was thinking just 3 months ago, we elected a party that one of its main positions is let's get out of Europe, let's get out of anything having to do with Europe. So I was thinking, my question is addressed to anyone on the panel, is how can you convince European citizens, especially those who are on the receiving end of these draconian measures, who they view that it's been imposed by the European Union, how can you convince them that the European Union is beneficial to them?
A very key question. So who wants to tackle that one? It really goes to the heart of austerity load. The austerity load has been so heavy, the benefits of living in the Union are seen as less and less. And so I think there's concern about that point among many European citizens. So who wants to jump on that?
Well,
Mauro.
but very briefly, just to say that I'm talking about my country, so I cannot emphasize and speak in the name of the whole European Union, but I have to say that at least in Italy, the awareness that the problems do not come from Europe, but that Europe is somehow the constraint that forces us to solve the problems is very widespread. And the advantages of Europe are just by now so evident, just people moving around across borders without any border control, just with the same kind of currency, and with so many also rights as European citizens. And the European citizenship has been established by the treaty. So this is an enormous and tangible advantage that I was telling at the very beginning is now something people would never give up, even if they have to pay. Now, about Greece, I will ask the Greek colleague.
Thank you. I would like to point out 2 things. First, that the European integration evolution is gradual and slow. It started in 1951 with the establishment of the European Steel and Coal Community. it took a further step with Euratom, and in 1957 with the economic common market, or as European economic community, largely known as common market. Then it evolved in 1993, it became European Union, and it goes on. As in every institution, there are ups and downs. But the vision remains there, is the integration of Europe. We don't lose sight of the vision, although there are downturns and we are going downhill. There will come moments when we will be going uphill as well. And as my Italian colleague Mauro pointed out, there are a lot of benefits, although there are economic difficulties, but let's say there are the main freedoms, the freedom of movement, the freedom of self, the freedom of movement of capitals within the European Union. Now, where we are in a hardship situation in Greece, a Greek dentist, a Greek physician, a Greek engineer can go and work in Germany without any permit. Whereas in order to migrate in the United States, it's impossible, although he is well qualified.
Very key point. Okay, let's move to this side. We just have 10 minutes left, so
thank you.
Brevity is the key here.
Thank you, and thank you, worthy Consul Generals, for such informative and insightful review of the situation. Very briefly, my question is like, or through you, in fact, I want to learn that what is the point of view of some leading economist and expert of human development on this, that whether this Eurozone and European Union will be to the benefit of all members, or will it be to the benefit of only some members, and other members, for other members it will be problematic thing? Yeah.
Very important question about benefit. Who will benefit and who will benefit the most?
I mean, if I understood the question correctly, I think you're referring to economic experts, commentators. I mean, I think what everyone has seen over the past days, weeks, months is that there's a whole variety of opinions on whether the solution is right. And indeed, if you look at people commenting on where the US economy is, lots of people have different ideas about how the best way to secure growth. And I don't think the Eurozone or indeed the European Union is any different. So my comment would merely be there is a whole wide range of opinions which all our governments listen to and take account of, but that's the beauty of free speech and the beauty of different types of perspectives and economic experts. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, but I think that's how I see it.
Well, just really very briefly, maybe, I think you can distinguish the answer by looking at the economic and political benefits. I think the answer is simple. By all aspects, it's a win-win situation for all member states. I know that some people take the position that some countries, and among them Germany, is a main beneficiary while others sort of are losing out. I think that's rubbish. And we've seen it in the past before we had this present crisis. If you really look at the figures, you will see that the GDP for all countries that have joined has gone up because intra-European Union trade has increased for all, not only for the main exporting nations, but for all. So I don't want to go deeper into this, and there are other aspects like the one mentioned by my Greek colleague, the freedom of movement, the freedom to take up employment for EU citizens within the whole EU region. These are all things that are beneficial to all member states. But I would probably mention also the political benefit. Together, we are a bloc of 500 million people, and this is quite a big number of people. So, and if you look at the combined economic power that the European Union has, we are, at least theoretically, one of the major players globally. Unfortunately, we aren't always, because we still lack the sort of the political structure that would enable us to react faster and more determined in certain situations. So that's a weakness. But in any case, I would also simply say none of the European member states would be politically more influential than as a member of this family. And in any case, you know, we are in a way acting as a member of the European Union family, as well as in certain respects still in our national capacity. So I think it's a win-win for everybody. Thank you.
Super. Okay, 2 more questions on each side, briefly.
All right. I have a question for Greece. Recently, just today, I think, the European zone members said that if Greece is willing and it can show that it can commit to financial stability, they will keep it in the Eurozone. So I was wondering whether you have any austerity measures which further decrease, new austerity measures which further decrease the deficit in already planned or in mind. And second question, to the United Kingdom, how far would you go in saving the Eurozone?
So we'll begin with Greece and then to the UK.
Thank you. Austerity measures have been taken during the last years, and these days there is discussion on introducing further austerity measures which are evaluated at 11.6 billion euros for an economy of 200 billion euros. GDP of Greece is now 200 billion euros. Introducing austerity measures of 12 billion euros, it means 6% of the GDP. And then if you take into account that the government budget is about 55 billion euros, it's about 15 to 20% of the government budget. I think by the end of the day, the government will introduce the new austerity measures. They are hurting a lot. They are hurting everybody. For instance, the President of the Republic gave up his remuneration. He's not paid anymore. As a token, as a symbol, to show to the people that he's participating in the suffering of the people. The salaries of the Prime Minister and ministers have been reduced by 30%. My salary has been reduced by 40%. It might be a further reduction of another 20%. But otherwise, there is no solution, there is no exit. It hurts a lot the unemployed people because the unemployment benefits are also reduced. It hurts a lot the old people whose pensions are reduced. But I don't know if there is any other exit from the problem. We hope, and at least some of the politicians who belong to the government cooperation scheme, that as long as the economy improves, the austerity measures will correspondingly be reduced as well. If the economy in the next, let's say, 2 years has a betterment, then the austerity measures will be gradually reduced. We have that hope at least.
Okay, now to the UK.
If I may, I might actually slightly challenge the premise of the question, because I think what is very clear is that it's not the role of countries outside the Eurozone, whether that be the United Kingdom or whether that be the United States, to save the euro. That's very much the next steps on how decisions are taken in the Eurozone is for national governments of those member countries in the Eurozone, and it's not for the United Kingdom or indeed others to direct that process. if the question is about, how important is the Eurozone to the UK, it is absolutely important. As I think I said in my remarks at the very beginning, over a third of our exports go to European Union countries. The stability of the European economy is absolutely crucial, both to the UK's economic recovery and also for the global economic recovery. So if that's the question, absolutely.
Okay. Now let's go to this side.
My question is for Mr. Andreades. The question is in regard to kind of maximizing tax revenue in Greece, because I know historically that there has been a significant issue of tax evasion, and most of the remarks that I've heard you make today have regarded cutting spending and making those types of reforms. But I guess my question is, what kind of future ideas does Greece have for reforming tax policy?
Thank you. There is widespread tax evasion in Greece, that's true. But now everybody understands that tax evasion is not a good thing because it hurts everybody. And we didn't, for instance, we did have, or we were not as conscientious as you are in the United States. When somebody buys an item, you take automatically receipt. That was not working this way in Greece. Some were issuing receipts, some were not issuing receipts in order to tax evade. And the public did not react to it, to this practice. Now, everybody is thinking that I should ask a receipt because it's fair. If I'm paying tax, why the others should not pay taxes? So the mentality is gradually in mutation on a better way. It's not easy to have a tax reform automatically. Other countries tried it in the past. There is tax evasion even in the United States. You made an agreement with Switzerland to reveal to the United States government the names of tax evaders who invest their money in Switzerland. Germany made a similar agreement with Switzerland. It appears that it's not working that well as it was initially expected. It's a continuous effort. We hope that it will bear fruits in the near future.
Yes, please, the Italian perspective.
Because also in Italy we have a problem of endemic tax evasion. So Mario Monti declared war on tax evasion, saying very clearly that tax evaders are criminals. The instrument that has been devised, and then we'll see the implementation, we're very hopeful about it, is basically a database whereby there would be an automatic check between what you get, what you declare in your tax return, and the expenses that you every year you you have in terms of cars, yachts, and other assets. If this is implemented, I think it will be a dramatic cultural change. So fingers crossed, and let's hope it will be done.
Great, very insightful. So one question more from each side. Let's begin on this side.
Right, well, first of all, thank you very much all for coming. Your insights have been amazing, actually. But I want to pick up actually on the two questions that were asked before me on this one. The first was, how are we selling? What is it? Why are we doing this? And you answered, well, we're slowly going for integration, and that's our goal. And then afterwards, you gave the answer to about all the suffering that's going on at the moment in Greece, which sort of hit me in a sense. And I sort of thought about that economist Keynes, who said, in the long run, we're all dead. So why are we suffering? What's out there that we're striving for that's worth all this suffering now? What is it? What is the future, and why is it worth all this? And this could also be picked up by someone else.
Mm-hmm. Deeply philosophical question. I think it deserves a philosophical answer.
Well, there is an axiom in the Roman law according to which if somebody is suffering by its own faults, or if somebody is damaged by his own faults, he should not consider himself as suffering because he caused the suffering. So it partly, not absolutely, but partly applies to our case. We overborrowed. We should not have done this in the first place. And then, when we realized the problem, we should have taken redressing measures immediately, not to leave the situation to linger for a long time. Of course, as I mentioned in my introductory note, the program which was introduced initially was tailored not exactly to the necessities of the day. It was overestimating things and overestimating the effects of the program. It proved that the problem was more deep, more structural, and it needed more time. And the restrictions which were imposed initially, as I mentioned, it was forbidden to us to buy bonds, our bonds, from the secondary market. The bonds resulted in circulating at 10%. For instance, we paid in August a bond which was owned by a hedge fund of the United States. They bought the bond at 10%. We paid them at 100%. So they made, in a very limited time, 90% of gain. It was a bond of 3.5 billion euros. This was a restrictive measure which, in my view, I may be wrong, was unjustified. Now, the European Bank, Central Bank, took the initiative to overcome this problem for Spain and Italy. We hope that it will apply to us as well. Why we suffer? We suffer, that's true. But in every birth, there is a suffering. The laboring woman is suffering. After that, she has the baby. When she delivers, she has the baby, she is glad. We hope that we will see that glad day.
That's a very positive note. And one final question now.
Good
you,
evening.
sir, have the final question of the night.
My question is about the dimension of the European Union, because here we have 4 countries, but European Union is made of 27 countries. So do you think that the political integration which you mentioned is achievable also among all the 27 countries, especially considering that there are some countries in Eastern Europe which are going in the opposite direction, for example, Hungary? And if you think there is such a tie between the number of countries and the political integration, what do you think about the further expansion of the European Union? So should we include other countries also? For example, I'm thinking about Turkey, in which Italy would have a great interest, but what would be the consequence on the political integration of Europe?
Thank you. Well, I had hoped you wouldn't ask that question, but you are absolutely right to ask it. Well, I believe that political integration will advance, but slowly. I'm not sure that in my time we will see sort of the United States of Europe, something some of us probably were hoping for to see still in the coming years, way back in probably the 80s or 90s, when we thought the European Union would develop faster and clearly towards ever increasing integration. I think the development of the last years has shown that this process certainly will take a lot more time. But if it needs that time, then it has to be. Nevertheless, I believe that we will be able, and we have to be able, to implement certain or to take certain steps which will also give the European Union a stronger political coordination, maybe not in all areas, but especially in the area of fiscal and economic policy. And as I said, this is already happening. So like in other areas, it will come gradually. It will come by practice. And if it works well, then people will probably also be ready to accept additional steps. But definitely, I believe it's going to be slow. And as to the further extension, well, I don't foresee a lot of further extension in the near future. We have a couple of new members, small countries lined up, which will not be a big problem to absorb. As to Turkey, that's a huge question. I wouldn't know. I really wouldn't know. The interesting thing is that, as I understand, Turkey itself is at the moment slowing down its pace of pushing to become a member of the European Union, because I believe it sees probably more clearly than it did before that it also has advantages to stay independent if you have a certain critical mass, and that Turkey probably has. And now that Turkey is doing so well economically, I think probably the push to become a member will not or will be less strong. But in any case, the negotiations are ongoing. They can drag on for quite a while. The German government, which has been for a long time the main objector to Turkish membership, has already 10 years back, or rather 14 years back now in 1998, changed its position. We have said we stick to what we had agreed to, and that is to open negotiations with Turkey in good spirits. And so we, together with the other member states, I think we will just continue to see how this is developing, and when the moment comes, well, will be difficult. But I hope the German government will stick to its position. So that's what I have to say.
Wonderful. So, one more response here.
With regard to the expansion, we will have soon Croatia joining the European Union.
And that will add another dimension to the discussion, won't it? And the discussion will go on, certainly. But let me say thanks to several of you tonight. Thank you to the audience for your sense of engagement. And very, very special thanks to our panel, Ioannis Andreades, Mauro Battocchi, Pryia Guha, and Rothen. Thank you so much for your wit and your wisdom and your warmth.